to another episode of the Daily Flip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be talking about a little bit of infighting within the DNC. No doubt, if you were paying attention today in the news, you saw the headlines that the vice-chair elections have the possibility of being overturned and having to be done again. It's through an interesting little rules committee. We'll get into all the details, but it's a fun one. We'll also end today with our daily delight, a story meant to leave you feeling positive and ready to take on the day. Now, that's enough rambling from me. Let's jump in to our daily debate. Is the DNC getting rid of some of its old candidates a good thing or a bad thing? Throw your thoughts down in the comments section. And what I mean by that is the octogenarians, the ones who have been there for a long time. And with that, let's actually jump into our article that comes from the Daily Caller today. Headline reads, DNC moves to void David Hogg's election to party vice chair on a technicality. And actually, the headline just says on technicality. But more proper grammar would be a technicality. But that's besides the point. So, is the party system nowadays too weak? Are the parties not able to stand up for themselves? Most people would say, yes, this is how you have a person like a Donald Trump come in and be able to take over the RNC. And yet, the DNC was able to stave off someone like Bernie Sanders. In this case, you show another mechanism by which they are able to stave off challengers who are actively seeking that the party become different, that it be a little bit more revolutionized underneath new leadership, or at least new candidates who can pave the way for a different point of view. And that's not to say that he's right or wrong. That's not to say the DNC is right or wrong. We're not going to give my opinions at this point. It's simply to actually break down whether or not the parties are as strong as we believe. This has been a narrative for a long time, and even people nowadays say that the parties have been stripped of their agency and their power because of PAC money and small dollar donors and this sort of voter campaign finance reform that specifically put the power of the purse in other places. Normally, the party used to be the one that could actually provide the most of the funding. They had a lock on what the candidate could or couldn't do. In theory, they got to basically choose which candidate would be at the front of the ticket. And that is when you have a party that is able to unify, find the most centrist, most electable candidate, or at least the elites of the party are able to, and therefore put forward a person that they think is acceptable to the American people. Though, I think that both Reagan and Trump provide examples of people who came from the outside and were able to really sweep up the RNC mechanisms and use them to their advantage. The DNC has been a little bit more lockstep for quite some time, but this is different now because the DNC is in a time of crisis, in my opinion. And not my opinion, you can ask a lot of people, who's the leader of the Democratic Party? And you don't necessarily get many good answers. And though David Hogg may be annoying and maybe I don't agree with a lot of his politics, he at least is trying to use the mechanisms within the DNC to put forward better candidates, and then also he's doing it with outside pressure from a PAC, or more accurately, a group, a fundraising group, a nonprofit, that he was able to set up. And this is something that I at least appreciate about David Hogg. He's not going to just sit back and take it as it is. He is going to personally take on the responsibility, or at least he's going to help out his organization. He's going to get them to pledge $20 million, and you can find that reporting in Playbook for this specific number. It is $20 million, but if you need a reference for it, it was in today's Playbook. And if that's too insider DC for you, you can just trust me on that because I remember the number specifically. But they pledged $20 million in order to primary out candidates that they believe are ineffectual and or don't actually have a vision for the future. And this is what the Bernie Sanders wing, and that's not to say Hogg is 100% in that category, but this is what the Bernie Sanders wing has been asking for a long time. And this is what AOC and her new energy, and I'd say that not in the way that her policies are new to any degree. A lot of them are actually old or repeat policies that Bernie Sanders has issued before, Elizabeth Warren has issued before. But her new energy, her young energy, her more progressive energy is trying to capitalize within the party. And now you have forces like David Hogg doing it from the outside. But the party in this case actually held. So let's actually go into the quote here describing what happened. Quote, following the Credentials Committee's decision that the vice chair election had not followed proper parliamentary procedures, it will bring the vote to the DNC's full body of members to decide whether or not to call a new election for Hogg's vice chair seat and the seat of another DNC vice chair, Malcolm Kenyatta. The Credentials Committee ruling comes after Clean Free, a Native American attorney whom Hogg defeated in February to win his role as vice chair, challenged the results of the election. And this is there's two ways that you can look at it. Hogg says that they're targeting him because this specifically is something that they decided to go through with after he said that he was going to try to use money in order to primary people out of the party, or at least out of their seats, in order to make sure more progressive and more forward-focusing and younger candidates were on the ballot. You could also look at it from a different perspective, which the DNC actually says, and the spokeswoman from the DNC says, no, this is a legitimate investigation that happened after candidate Free made a claim back in February, and this has been in process since then. It is just interesting that the timing lines up, that they finally decide to go through with it and actually say, yeah, actually there was something to this here, that it came after maybe 3 weeks after he said he was going to put money behind primarying people in the DNC, members of the DNC, or active members of the DNC. And this was big news at the time because a lot of people criticized him for taking this approach. Why aren't you having the big tent approach? Why aren't you making sure those resources go towards other candidate races who aren't as close, that you don't necessarily want to spend the money on a primary when you have that as a sure lock? Use that $20 million somewhere else. Get your organization to back it somewhere else. And like I said, you have to give credit to Hogg where it is due. If there was a young conservative Republican doing this exact same thing, I think at least the younger generation could sit back and say, okay, they're actually trying to do something. Hogg is pretty darn young. He was a part of the one of the shootings in Florida, Parkland, and he used his capital that he gained from that to get into certain social circles. And now, Parkland was over 10 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, and maybe a little bit shorter than that. But the point being, even if he was 16, 14 at that time, he'd be 24 now. I believe he's just shy of 28, but you can correct me on that if you want to. But this is a young member taking agency, saying there's something broken with these parties, and not necessarily saying we need to tear it down, but using the mechanisms within these parties in order to try to reform them and get new people in there and get new leadership in. And if a Republican was doing it, a conservative was doing it on the other side of the aisle, you would have to give credit to him. And as a young person, I respect it. Do I think that the parties should be stronger as organizations? Yes, I do, because I think that they have a good moderating effect, and that we need to have a contained Overton window in order to precipitate stability throughout the country, whether that be economically, whether that be on a policy basis. It keeps us consistent. It shows our allies what they can expect, more or less, and if the foreign policy is aggressive enough in some cases, it can show our enemies what they should expect and actually ward them off, because there's a stable presence of not going from an isolationist to an otherwise, though I think that we could lean more isolationist and get away with it. But the point being that stability on so many different fronts can very well be good. Now, the counter argument to that would be is that if the stability is actively working against the interest of the average or the middle American, then yeah, that's not necessarily a good thing. But to pretend as though the free-for-all pit of populism that we have seen come to bear, where people are willing to simply just offer money to the population and say, this is how we'll fix your problems, this is how government will step in and be able to do it, this is how we can use the tools of government in order to satiate your need for solving this problem, that is even worse, in my opinion. And it leads to government being used as a tool more easily. It becomes the government being used as a tool in order to reach specific ends and simply meet campaign promises, which is what, and monetary welfare policies and other sort of handouts, quote unquote, that term is overused, but quote unquote federal handouts that the left and certain populist left candidates have been arguing for, and certain left candidates have been doing for a long, long time. But hey, that's enough on that. We'll see if the parties can get stronger. We'll see if there's enough change and enough pushback and possibly even campaign finance reform, which I don't necessarily see coming anytime soon. But if that was to happen, it would be a big, big change, and the parties would be a lot stronger. Or they can be rebuilt from the inside, and they can have strong leadership, which is what the Democrats don't have right now. And honestly, without Donald Trump, the Republicans wouldn't have it either. So, with all that, let's jump into our daily delight. This story will definitely leave you smiling. If you go and look at it, the headline for it is talking about a photo that is attached, and it reads, Bunny and Pup's latest album cover. And honestly, the dog looks so done with it, and the bunny is kind of enjoying himself, kind of sitting there like, oh, I'm the king of this mattress, I'm the king of this pad. So if you want to see that cute little photo, you want to leave with a smile on your face, you can find that link in the description, as well as the Daily Caller link in the description below that like and subscribe button. Also down there, you can find the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Podvine, as well as the Twitter handle at Your Daily Flip, where I post links to the episodes that come out on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, as well as the 6 and 6 podcast, which is 6 stories from around the world in 6 minutes or less, and that comes out on Tuesday and Thursday at the same YouTube channel, same RSS feed, and same time at noon Eastern. So, with all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe, don't die.